I'm hungry for number 3. What's that?
Number 3 is meditation. And meditation is something that there are tons of studies that show that not only is it a great stress reliever, but it increases mental clarity, memory is improved, our immune system is improved. There's so many different reasons to do it. But most people think of meditation as like having to put on monk's robes and like chant for hours and hours and hours. And there's tons of techniques out there. But really, one tool to start with is just peaceful breathing, and belly breathing is what I call it. And the meditation process changes our brainwave patterns into a more relaxed state. And breathing, just simple breathing, has been shown to do the same thing. So it's not that you need to meditate for an hour a day, although if you did, you'd be a lot more effective. But if you just even take a couple deep breaths throughout the day, it's going to make a huge difference. Most of us are chest breathers. If you notice when we're in a stress mode, going back to that fight or flight, our breathing becomes really rapid, and we only breathe with the top of our lungs. So where if we can put our hands on our belly and take a deep breath in, and let that belly come out, which we're not trained to do in our culture, right? We're always trying to suck it in, especially as guys, but women do the same thing. We want to let that belly go with our breath, and then our whole lung field is able to expand. It's not only going to bring more oxygen into our body, which makes a huge difference as far as healing and being able to relieve stress, but it's helping change our brainwave patterns into a much more relaxed state. And so we innately do that when we're stressed, and that all of a sudden we're going and we're breathing really shallowly, and then all of a sudden we're like, oh. And just even that one cleansing breath makes a change. Well, what if we proactively did that throughout the day, where we had a certain cue of, if you're driving around town and going that, every time you saw a brake light, you took a deep breath. Having every time that the phone rings, you take a deep breath and really get some more oxygen into our body and really start changing the way that we handle the things that are coming at us, rather than being gripped. Because if we're in a really stressed state, that breath shutting down is only going to make us more stressed. Whereas if we can take a deep breath beforehand, it'll change the interaction you're having.
Right. What I love about what you're saying is that you're kind of breaking down for a lot of people their generalized concept of even what meditation is.
Right.
You know, you don't have to close yourself off in a room and put your hands together, be in the robes, like you said. CDs can help. There's all kinds of tools, but it can be as simple as being at a stoplight and just taking one purposeful breath.
Right.
And I think to my clients, a lot of times what I use is that the definition of meditation is just having a singular focus. And so that kind of brings back to, you can focus on anything. You can, this right now can be a meditation for both you and I, because I'm completely focused on this conversation with you.
Right.
Yeah. So when you bring that focus into your breath, whether it's at a stoplight or waiting at baseball practice, or in the middle of the day, in the middle of your workday, taking 5 minutes to just focus on your breath, that can be a form of meditation.
I love that. Wow, great tool.
Yeah, cool.
Well done.
All right. Cool, so what's number 4?
The last one is communication. And when communication's brought up as far as stress management, people are kind of surprised by that. Your clients might not be, because I know that you do a lot of really great work around that. But teaching a person to communicate is really an important skill that has been lost. I mean, we're in an information age. People are calling it a communication age, but we're not communicating nearly as well as we could. So we all know that as those little stresses build up, we get to a blowing point, right? Where we just blow our lids, right? So communication is a great way of dissipating that. And that doesn't mean just having a clarity talk with the person that you might be having a confrontation with. It might be with your spouse or ex-spouse, or with your kids or coworkers. That obviously is going to clear the air and always has good resolution there. But communication is also with yourself, and that brings us back to the journaling exercise. Some people might not feel comfortable talking about the things that are bottling up inside of them, and don't really have an access point to it, but you always have a journal to go to. And the journaling exercise really, just like you had described before, it puts it down out there rather than it swimming around in here. Because as you know, when we start thinking about something and obsessing about it, like all these tangents keep coming up, and then all of a sudden, only 5 minutes later, you're like, how did I get into that frame of mind? Like, how did I start thinking about that? And you try and trace it back, and it all came from, oh wow, I got to make sure I pick up the kids on time because we got to get to practice.
Right.
Right? But then all these other consequences came. Whereas if you put it down on a paper, you can see in a totally different perspective and realize, okay, that's handleable.
Right.
I can handle that. That's no big deal. But all these other things that our minds do don't show up on the page, and then they can be dissipated there. So communicating, obviously, with people is going to be really important, but then also with yourself and kind of understanding the process that you're going through, understanding what's on your plate right now, allows that stress to subside, because then you can see it out there on a page rather than having it swim in your head.
So you consider journaling a form of communication?
I do.
Of self-communication?
Of self-communication.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's really good. Yeah, that just shattered my whole definition of what communication is, and that's a really good one.
Well, and one of the things about communication that I think is really important is that communication be constructive communication. And again, it kind of goes back into the positive, negative stress. A positive stress is something that's constructive for you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of communication that happens in the form of venting that can be really negative. Venting I'm all for, in that if it forwards you. If you need to just kind of vent to a good friend and get things off your chest and you're done with it, fantastic. But what happens a lot of times is people that vent a lot get stuck in it a lot, and it becomes a complaining festival. And one, that's not good for the person that's complaining, and it's not good for you if you're the one listening, because you're just stuck in a negative victim story, right? So anytime that you're finding yourself complaining about something, it's good to identify that, okay, that's something I want to have change. So, but how can I positively switch it into, like, well, that's what I don't want. What do I want? And be able to switch the conversation into that. And the same thing is done for the journal as well. I know for me in my life, I used to only journal when things were going poorly in my life, where I needed to do that, right? And I found a bunch of journals, this happened years ago, I found a bunch of journals that I had from years past, and I was reading through them, and it was all complaints about things and how stressed I was. And it was good, it was a good tool for me to put it there, like we just said. But now when I'm journaling, I'm always looking at it to be constructive. So I acknowledge what's going on, that I'm stressed, and this and this and this are worrying me. But then it becomes this creative exercise of, like, what can I do to change that situation? So venting is good, but don't get stuck in the venting, and switch it into something that, okay, what can I do to be able to make this a better situation?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and something that was coming up as you were saying that is also considering, you know, because for a lot of people, and especially in the context of divorce, what you may be upset about or what you may perceive you're stressed about is what somebody else is doing, right? The ex-spouse, or, you know, I mean, we could go on. And so to evaluate, how much of this do I have control over? Do I have control over this? Because at the very least, you can decide, okay, I don't have control over this, but you do have control over how much you're going to preoccupy yourself with it. You do have control over your own decision to let it go and to release it to some other place. You know, it could be a journal, or a confidant, or a mentor, or a family member, or a coach, or just anyone. But find that source that gives you that relief, because that release and that relief ultimately is control. And I hear that from so many people, you know, saying, I don't have any control over this, you know, and everything is a mess. That's, again, kind of a fallacy when you really break it down there. We always have control over how we spend our time, our money, and energy, including our thoughts and emotions.
Absolutely. And I've also found that the people that complain most about not having any control over the situation really are people that want to have some sort of control, right? And so something that you do really well with your clients, I know, is being able to find those aspects that you can control or manage or have empowerment within, so that those other things that seemingly are out of control can fall by the wayside, and you can just concentrate on what you can.
It puts it in perspective.
Yeah.
When you're concentrating on the things that you do have control over, then, you know, your attention is focused on that, because you can't really be hyper-focused on two things at once, and so the other one becomes minimized as a consequence. So, yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much, Jay. Can you just wrap up for us again the 4 tools? Kind of summarize that really quick. We want to leave them with all 4 and make sure that you got it all.
Right. Well, the 2-3-4 stress formula is, there's 2 types of stress. positive and negative. It comes in 3 forms: physical, biochemical, and emotional. And those 4 tools are your sleep, it's your exercise, it's meditation, and it's your communication. So
Beautiful.
Very simple things. Remember 2, 3, 4, and keep those in your mind throughout the day, and it'll make a big difference.
Beautiful. I love it. I love it. Great. Well, thank you so much, Jay. Again,
My pleasure.
I appreciate your time, and it's always good to see you. And if you'd like to learn more about Jay and his program, his home study course, please go to BeWellLifestyles.com. Thanks so much.